Hey folks, George here. In this set of videos, we're examining questions, the ethical and moral questions around medically assisted suicide and euthanasia. Last time, we examined the article by Daniel Callahan, When Self-Determination Runs Amok. This time, we're going to hear a retort by John Lachs entitled, When Abstract Moralizing Runs Amok. This is a very interesting kind of philosophy that I like because he starts his article with the claim that the problem with such abstract thinking is that it misses the real human predicament. I, George, am interested in philosophy that actually wrestles with real life questions, right? There are many philosophers out there. And by the way, I like abstract thinking as well. It's fun sometimes. But John Lachs is saying, let's start talking about real life for a second. The point of moral philosophy is to shed light on the difficult problems that we face in this life, in the real world. Abstracting the way that Callahan does is surprising to anyone who really is experiencing the problem of a terminal illness with unbearable suffering. Their problem is not an intellectual problem, but an existential problem. Their life is no longer any benefit to them. People in such terrible conditions suffer existence without any of the activities that give life meaning. After all, sometimes I feel like I'm suffering existence too. But very frequently, if you think about it for more than a second, some of the suffering I experience leads to some benefit or some valuable experience or some other activity that might give life meaning. Not so for people who are suffering terminal illness with unbearable suffering. There is no further benefit further down the line. Some people in such terrible conditions don't have the means to end their own life. And so, medicine can help bring them peace. It's an interesting issue in our society. Perhaps we could talk about this another time, but it is an interesting feature in our society that the medical profession has been given a monopoly on such medicine. Therefore, since we do live in that kind of society, it's reasonable to ask the medical profession for help in getting such medicine that can help me end my life peacefully. Recall one of Callahan's comments. Even if one has a right to suicide, Callahan said, this right can't be transferred to others, like a doctor, for example. But Callahan says, wait a second, it's difficult to understand why that's the case. Why can't I transfer the right to take my own life? Where's the problem there? I could transfer other sorts of things. And if I do, by the way, have the right to something, what's wrong with somebody helping me do something? Even if it's commit suicide. Now, one thing I like about Lachs is he admits where Callahan's argument is nice. He admits, for example, that we cannot sell ourselves into slavery. But that's only because we've decided as a society to set this kind of limit. Therefore, society can also set limits how it wishes in other ways, such as allowing people to sell assisted suicide. The biggest difference between these examples of slavery versus assisted suicide is the context and the circumstances. The circumstances in medically assisted suicide are such that this is a life that I've determined that I see no future in. That is an existential crisis because the unbearable suffering of this terminal illness takes away all value of my life. Callahan says doctors have difficulty and have no expertise in determining the value of life. Lachs says nonsense. Doctors have developed considerable skills in developing ways to discern and ways to really understand subjective experience. They turn my subjective accounts about my suffering into something objective that they can understand. I went to the emergency room once with kidney stones. I didn't know they were kidney stones. It was the first time I had ever had them. And the doctor sees me suffering. I'm telling the doctor, I'm suffering. I think my appendix burst or something. What do I know? And the doctor saw the way I was waving around and said, I've seen that kind of suffering before. I think it's kidney stones. Here, take this medicine. And instantly, my pain was relieved because the doctor did understand my subjective account. Doctors do recognize the objective medical difference between somebody who is depressed and one who is terminally ill and experiencing unbearable suffering of terminal illness versus the suffering of depression. There are objective differences there that doctors can discern. Anyone understands this. We all understand this. That said, this is not to give doctors the power of gods or something like that. Rather, it allows doctors flexibility. And that's what we should be doing in our society. The flexibility, by the way, might be illustrated with hospice care. Perhaps a patient doesn't want to have medically assisted suicide, but they want to die peacefully. They have flexibility to enter into hospice care. Or they have flexibility to fight the disease very aggressively. Or, Lachs suggests, let's give them the flexibility to enter into medically assisted suicide. Maybe Callahan is onto something when he suggests that this will lead to abuse. Perhaps this is right. However, this abuse is not a reason against medically assisted suicide. Really, what it's a reason against is against abuse. So therefore, let's fix the abuse, not medically assisted suicide. It's not medically assisted suicide that's the problem. It's the abuse that's the moral problem. Let's address that. That's Lachs's response to that problem. By the way, Lachs says, Callahan has set up a straw man. What does that mean? Nobody has ever said that self-determination shall be absolute. Nobody thinks that, right? There are always limits on rights. And those limits on the rights that we have should be set by the demands on social life, including the demands of unbearable suffering. The problem of abstract moralizing in the manner of Callahan is that it shuts its eyes to the real needs and real suffering of some individuals in society. Therefore, according to Lachs, we ought to permit medically assisted suicide. See you next time. Bye-bye.